on just top of Lamed Zayin and Aleph and Lamed Zayin 37a, and we are 5 lines down, second to last word. Just give myself a cup of tea.
Sure. Of course, if he wants to be real parochial grandson, maybe he hasn't read the whole Masechta. He may not want to. Yeah.
Okay.
One time you'd been following.
Okay, so now let's just review a little bit yesterday, and then this really is today is a very fun, nothing to do with Nazir.
Oh.
We're not in Masechtas Nazir here. More like Masechtas Pesachim and a few other Masechtas where this similar discussion takes place. Yesterday we discussed a concept called Heter Mitzdaref L'Isser. What does Heter Mitzdaref L'Isser mean? If you eat a kizayas, which is one measurement, but only a small amount of the kizayas has forbidden stuff.
Yeah.
So do you get malchus or not? So you said, for example, if a Nazir dips his bread in wine and he consumes a kizayas of bread and wine together, but there isn't a kizayas of wine on its own, does he get malchus or not? So if you say Heter Mitzdaref L'Isser, so then he does get malchus. That's because the bread combines with the wine to make a kizayas of forbidden substance, even though the forbidden substance itself is less than a kizayas. Okay, and the Gemara tried to see if that would be true in other areas as well. So the Gemara agrees that it is true with regard to sacrificing chametz. So we have a prohibition on bringing a sacrifice that is chametz. If you bring a kizayas of chametz and matzah together, or chametz and meat and something else, then you also incur a violation. We said though, according to Abaya, there's no shear to chametz on the mizbeach. There's no measurement. So even if you brought a small amount of chametz on its own without anything else, you'd also incur a violation. So according to Abaya, there's no need for Heter Mitzdaref L'Isser in that scenario. Another example was chametz and Pesach, which we said also is included in Heter Mitzdaref L'Isser. Okay, we also talk about the other possibility, which is if Heter Mitzdaref L'Isser doesn't work, what you need to do is kizayas b'k'dechilas pras. You need to eat one measurement within the unit of time typically associated with consuming such an amount of foods. So, for example, if you eat a measurement of foods, one measurement of the kizayas over 3 hours, there's no violation because you didn't eat it quick enough.
This table is too short. It reeks of human interaction. Especially arranged.
Come join us. Come join us, Eric. Hopefully we will not repulse you.
Okay.
Wait, we'll beat you to it a long time ago.
Okay. The source of Heter Mitzdaref L'Isser and Nazir was this idea of mishras. If the Nazir dips his bread in wine, okay. So the Gemara asks, Abaya offers an alternative. Amrle Abaya. Again, 5 lines down, now 6 lines down. 37a. Mimai d'hai mishras l'Heter Mitzdaref L'Isser hudasa. Dil malitin tam ke'eker hudasa. Maybe there's a different reason. Maybe the reason why if a Nazir dips his bread in wine, the entire thing is forbidden is not because Heter Mitzdaref L'Isser, meaning that half a kizayas of bread combines with half a kizayas of wine, but rather the Isser is because tam keker, meaning that the taste of the wine is considered the main component of what he's eating, and therefore because the entire kizayas, the entire measurement has the taste of wine infused, so therefore you're liable for the entire thing. So you don't prove at all that Heter Mitzdaref L'Isser. In other words, according to if Tom Gager, the difference would be as follows. Let's say a guy's eating bread at the same time as he's eating pits of a grape. Presumably pits don't really have much taste until you bite into them, right?
Pretty much.
So if a guy has a grape pit sandwich, okay?
Grape
So he's eating bread and grape pits at the same time. So if you say heter mitzaref l'isser, then heter mitzaref l'isser, and then you have one unit of half a kazayas of bread, half a kazayas of grape pits, and therefore grape seeds, and therefore you are liable for the prohibition. However, if you say tam ke'ikar, you're not liable, because there is no tam, there's no flavor of the grape seeds that have infused the sandwich. Presumably, my presumption here is that grape seeds don't taste anything until you bite into them. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but if that's the case, that would be difference. Okay, the Gemara just pauses a bye for a moment as comment. The Gemara asks a few other questions along the way. Okay, so the Gemara says, hold on a second. So the Gemara says, so what exactly happened here? Abaya, Rav Dimi originally said heter mitzaref l'isser by Nazir. Abaya had all these questions that we spoke about yesterday. Because they call halin to Yufta. And therefore his resolution is Hadar Amar Lei Litin Tam Ke'ikar. And then his proposed solution is to say Tam Ke'ikar. One second. So the Gemara is presuming here, is it the case that Abaye disagrees with the concept of heter mitzaref l'isser in every scenario? Is that what happens? In other words, we have three scenarios of heter mitzaref l'isser. We have Nazir, Chametz, and two scenarios of Chametz. So is the case that Abaye denies the concept of heter mitzaref l'isser, period? So the Gemara says, no, he doesn't. What happened was lebasar d'shani lei. After Rav Dimi resolved all the questions we spoke about yesterday, so he agrees that technically speaking, it is possible for heter mitzaref l'isser. He just proposes an alternative understanding for the specific scenario of Nazir. That alternative is, instead of heter mitzaref l'isser, it should be tam ke'ikar. The taste is the main thing, and sort of the taste infuses everything, and therefore you don't need to come on to heter mitzaref l'isser. You're eating a kazayas of taste worth of wine. So the Gemara says, maybe that the reason why Nazir is chayiv in a scenario of his bread dipped in wine is because of tam ke'ikar, because the bread is infused with the taste. You have one full kazayas of taste. Look at the Tanya, like we learned, that actually Mishra, somebody teaches that this word of Mishra by Nazir, lita in tam ke'ikar, it's coming to tell me that tam is ke'ikar. Shimshor anovim b'mayin v'yeshbem tam yayin. If a guy soaks grapes in water, the yeshbem tam yayin, and they have the taste of wine, chayev. He's chayev. And in other words, not because of heter mitzaref l'isser, but because of tam ke'ikar. And from here we learn to all other prohibitions in the Torah. That in general, the theory is tamis ke'ikar, which, like we said yesterday, if a guy puts a small amount of non-kosher meat in a soup, right? So he infuses the flavor of the meat in the entire soup, so that we would have tam ke'ikar. Now, in other words, the entire soup becomes prohibited. Now, just give a disclaimer here. It's actually not so simple. When we talk about a guy who puts a small amount of meat into soup and the entire soup becomes prohibited, it's actually a serious machlekes rishonim. And it's a very, very complicated sugya. I think there's a Rashi, there's a Tais, Rabbi Chaim Kain, Rabbi Tam, three different pathways that are alternative of the Rambam, which is how we pass on the halacha.
So it's different if it just accidentally fell in there. That would be a different situation.
Either accidental or intentional. It wouldn't make a difference. Now I'm explaining to the Gemara as if that it's the most obvious thing in the world, which is how we rule halachically.
Yeah.
That if a measurement, a small amount, let's say kazayas of non-kosher meats, right, pork, falls into a pot of soup, the entire soup becomes prohibited. That is actually not so simple.
Right. According
to many different rishonim, it depends. It's much more nuanced than that. Mm-hmm. According to Tosfos, it actually depends whether according to Rabbi Chaim Kain and Rabbi Tam in different place, it actually depends whether the volume was a kazayas or less than a kazayas. If a kazayas falls in the chicken soup, the whole chicken soup becomes prohibited. If it's less than a kazayas, it does not become prohibited. There is a debate, though, how to understand that. And according to Beis Yosef, that might not be the case. It might be that they're actually saying the same as the traditional understanding, which is that regardless of the quantity, as long as there isn't 60 times chicken soup to meat, it would be prohibited.
But if there is the 60.
If there is 60 times, then it would be prohibited. But for now, we'll try to explain the Gemara along the lines of whether more or less than a kazayas of meat falls into the soup, it would be prohibited.
The Beit Yosef rule on that from the Rambam.
1 second. I can't hear you. Little muffles.
I was just saying, is the Beit Yosef come from that from the Rambam?
Yeah, Beis Yosef comes from Rambam. Yeah.
Base position,
Correct.
please, Rabbi.
We're a little less than halfway down the page. First word on the line is done, followed by a little aleph.
You're on 37A.
37a. Okay, so now we learn the time caker, and again I'm explaining time caker the way we rule halachically, even if albeit the Rishonim disagree. From here we learn out the rest of the Torah. And we cannot have done Torah to all other prohibitions in the Torah. Nazir. If we examine Nazir in a certain sense is the weakest of prohibitions. Why is that? She'ein isura isur olam. It is not a permanent prohibition. For example, typical Nazir is only 30 days, right? Pork, it would be usur as long as you live. The ein isura isur hana. You're allowed to benefit from Nazir, as opposed to example, if you plant a vegetable in a vineyard, that vegetable is called kloi hakarim, and you're not allowed to benefit from it. Similarly, if a tree grows fruit for the first 3 years, so in Israel it's a little more complicated, but in Chutz La'aretz, if you know a tree is under 3 years old, then you can't eat the fruits. It's called orla. Those fruits are also prohibited in Hana. Can't benefit from them. Okay. The yesh heter li'isurei. A Nazir, he's in the middle of Nazir, right? He can't drink wine. Then he goes to a rabbi. He says he claims he regrets his Nazirs, and boom, he's permitted to drink wine. So you can undo the Isser. Very unique. You can't undo Klayim, right? Most other Isurim can't be undone. And despite all these leniencies, also by Tom Kaker, we gave it the stringency of saying that the taste is like the main thing. The taste of grapes or wine is like the wine and grapes itself. So certainly, kloi hakarim, if you plant something in a vineyard that's not a vine, she'isur and isur olam, that the prohibition is forever. The isur and isur hana, and you can't benefit from the item. The ein heter isur, and there's no way to undo it. Ein adinshi also by Tom Kaker. It certainly should be the case that the taste of kloi hakarim should be like the ikar, like the item itself. In other words, if you have a vegetable that grew in a vineyard, and you take the vegetable and you put it into I don't know, you take let's say it's a carrot, you put the carrot into the soup, the entire soup is prohibited because you've infused the taste of kloi hakarim. Klayim literally means grafting. In this case, it's not kloi hakarim isn't necessarily grafting, but we call it grafting if you plant a foreign species in a vineyard. There are other types of klayim that don't involve a vineyard. Kloi hakarim involves a vineyard. Klayim of the vineyard. That's what it means. Mm-hmm. Okay. V'hu adin la'arla b'shtayim, and two of these categories are true of arla. A little complicated. Which two categories is the debate here in Taisus? Just briefly, I'll choose an opinion for you. That is that arla is not a forever isser, because sort of the tree becomes permitted after 3 years. So you have a tree, everything is prohibited about it, but 3 years later it's permitted. But it's still, what grew is prohibited forever, and that prohibition is isser hana, and you can't benefit from it. So therefore, it would be true of arla as well, that tam of arla would be ke'ikr. If you have the taste of an arla item, right? You make a smoothie, you put an apple juice of arla that you made from your arla apples, and infuses the taste of the whole smoothie, the whole thing is prohibited. Okay. Amarle Ahumer Rabbanon. 1 second. Okay. Oh, so so this is so Abaya asked the following question. Why don't we learn Tam Ke'ikar from Nazir? And indeed we do find that somebody learns Tam Ke'ikar from Nazir. So why does Rav Dimi choose Heter and Staraf L'Isser? Why doesn't he choose Tam Ke'ikar? So Gemara's response is so one of the rabbis responded, Rabbi Fu Kika Amar Rabbi Kiva. We 1 second. When Rav Dimi suggested Heter and Staraf L'Isser, Rabbi Fu, they were going with the opinion of Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva says, sorry, it's Rabbi Fu. Rabbi Fu is Rabbi Fu Amar V'Yechanan, and Rav Dimi as well, I believe. Yeah, and Rav Dimi as well. So Rabbi Fu and Rav Dimi that said Heter and Staraf L'Isser, they were talking in the opinion of Rabbi Kiva. The truth is, according to the mainstream opinion, the rabbi's opinion, it's true. Nazir is a source for mishras for Tam Ke'ikar. The taste is like the main components. Okay. So the Gemara says, "Hi, Rabbi Kiva. Which Rabbi Kiva are we talking about? Ilim Rabbi Kiva dehacha. This is Rabbi Kiva. It's not we learned Rabbi Kiva. Aimer afilu shara pita b'yayin v'yesh b'kedei l'tzar of kazayas chayav." Rabbi Kiva says that if somebody dips his bread in wine and eats it, and there's a kazayas, you're chayav. Evidently, that seems to indicate that the bread could combine with the wine for kazayas. Sigmar says no, not necessarily. Umimai, who says Dilmo who de eka kazayas be'ena? We're talking about where the bread has absorbed a kazayas of wine. The chitem ma'alamemra. If you'll say that should be obvious, you incur a violation. La fuka mitanakama the amar sheyishtor v'yis yayin. The Tanakama says that the measurement is to drink a revius of wine and not to eat wine. In other words, so according to the other, Rabbi Kiva says you dip it in wine, you eat it. If there's a kazayas, then you're chayav. Why is that? First, the Gemara is proposing because heter and starflet. So now the Gemara is proposing because you actually ate a kazayas of wine. In other words, because the wine is now absorbed in food substance, all of a sudden we change the measurement. We say it's not a revius, it's a kazayas. 1 second. Okay, and this is against the rabbi's opinion. The rabbis say the measurement is always going to be a revius. Even if you're, so to speak, eating wine by eating bread dipped in wine, the measurement is also a revius. Okay. So Mara says, El Rabbi Kiva de Brisa. It's the opinion of Rabbi Kiva of the Brisa. The Tanya we learned. Rabbi Kiva says, Nazir shashara pita b'yayin v'ochel kazayas mipas u'miyayin chayav. If a Nazir dips his bread in wine and combined between the bread and the wine, you have the kazayas, you're chayav. It's simple. Amar le Ravacha breder of Eva le Ravashi. So Ravacha, the son of Eva, says to Ravashi, Rabbi Kiva de kamayim le lahai v'chol mishras lahatim starf l'itzer. Yeah, 1 second. Okay, so according to Rabbi Kiva, that says that Mishras teaches us heter and staraf l'isser, litin tam ke'ikar minole. How does Rabbi Kiva know the concept that tam is ke'ikar? That if you have the taste of something, it's as if you ate the forbidden item itself. In other words, even if you don't eat the pork, if you eat the taste of the pork, that's also forbidden. So the Gemara says minole. How does he know? So the Gemara says yalaf mi basar b'cholav. He learns it out of the prohibition of eating meat and milk together. What is the prohibition of eating milk and meat together? Lav tam ba'almahu. The prohibition is don't cook them together. Meaning if you cook them together, but you eat them separately, right? Then it would be permitted. For example, if a guy cooks meat and milk together, and then he eats the meat, he incurs a violation. But you have the milk is separate. The answer is because the prohibition of basar b'cholov is the taste of meat with milk together. together? So therefore, we should learn from basar v'cholav that the prohibition is taste, and basar v'cholav serves as the source of the rest of the Torah. So Gemara says, "Rabbanan basar v'cholav like amrina dechidushu." The rabbis say you can't learn out of basar v'cholav because basar v'cholav is a very unique category. It's a chiddush. It's a new idea. My chiddush. What's so unique? The fact that each one's permitted separately, it's only the combination that's prohibited. The Gemara says there's nothing unique about that. Klayim is the same way, right? Grapes are permitted, cucumbers are permitted, but if you plant cucumbers in a vineyard, right, you incur a violation. And similarly, if you plant them in the same pot, you plant to take a seed of grapes and take a seed of cucumbers, plant them together. It's also prohibited. Okay, so the Gemara says, Gemara says what's unique about basar v'cholav is that if the taste transfers, it specifically has to be done through cooking. If, for example, a guy is stirring a pot with meat and milk together for an entire day, and the Gemara presumes that an entire day means that the taste has become infused, so now the meat is beginning to taste like milk. And somebody eats that meat, biblically speaking, it is permitted because you didn't cook it. The prohibition is only when the taste transfers through cooking.
And cooking implies heating.
Heat, yeah. So you take milk and meat and you heat it up to 175 degrees, and you incur a violation.
You have a cold cheeseburger.
What if you take a piece of cheese and put it on top of a piece of meat? Then that's not even basar v'cholav, right? Because if eating cheese and meat together is a rabbinical prohibition, there's no basar v'cholav at all because there's no taste combination. You're tasting them combined, but the meat that you're eating tastes like meat, and the cheese you're eating tastes like cheese. The Gemara point is pointing out even if you have meat that tastes like milk because you've been stirring it for a full day. So by this point, the meat itself has the taste of milk in it. It's still not a biblical violation, because the only way that the meat that tastes like that has the taste of milk is prohibited is if it was cooked together. Okay. Gemara says Gemara says this is a good argument. It's very unique. Basar v'cholav, it's the taste of cooking that's prohibited. Gemara says, Elayalef, now we're on top of 37b, Elayalef megi'ule ovdei kachavim. Very quick, very briefly, so the Jews conquered Midian. So after the Midianim tried to sin, they sent their girls to seduce Jewish males. They conquered Midian, and sure enough, in the spoils of the battle, there's pots and pans, right? And basically, God tells Moshe to tell the people they need to kosherize their pots and pans. Why is that? Presumably using a non-kosher pot is prohibited. Why is it prohibited? Must be because the taste. What do we see from there? Thomas Ke'eker. You have a clean pot, non-kosher pot, and all it has is the taste of yesterday's pork, or today's pork for that matter. And it's still prohibited. God says you have to kosherize the pots. The Amrach about it, etc. Meaning that if you have a grill, so to speak, you need to blow torch. You need to use fire to kosherize it. Remember, this is to tell me the asiri that the taste is prohibited. The taste that's in the pot, lav time balma, it's just taste. The pots are clean. The osar and they're prohibited. So the truth is, any other scenario, any other Torah prohibition of eating, also it's the taste that's prohibited. So the Gemara says, very good, it's good, strong proof. Why do the rabbis need to learn from Nazir that Tam is Ke'eker? Why can't they learn from Gulei of Gechavim, where we see that God tells Moshe to kasher the pots because the pots have this taste of non-kosher foods? So the Gemara says, Amar lei hasam chidushu. The truth of the matter is, non-kosher pots are also chiddush. Okay, what's so unique about non-kosher pots? Why is that some sort of unique category? As follows. We're not going to go into the details here, but we'll say just take it as a given. We'll get to it in Masechtas Avodah. But if the taste is it doesn't the non-kosher food doesn't provide a good taste, it's called nice and tam of gam. It gives a bad taste to it. So then it's not prohibited. Okay. The gabe gula gechavim nice of gam mutters. In general, a bad taste is permitted. The gabe gula of gechavim also. But with regard to the non-kosher pots, even though the non-kosher pots are imparting a foul taste, it's still the taste is still prohibited. Presumably, the Gemara is saying because the pot is over a day old, and sort of the rabbis accept the tradition that a pot only gives good taste for a day. After a day, there's no more good taste. It's a disqualified taste. So the Gemara says if that's the case, so then how could Rabbi Kiva learn from it? The Gemara says you're right. According to Rabbi Kiva, we're not talking about pots that were used more than a day ago. The pots were used a day ago, more than a day, more than 24 hours. Then you're right, it imparts a foul taste. And therefore, you don't have to kosherize those pots. What are the pots that have to be kosherized? The ones that were used that day. The day that they went to battle, they conquered them in battle. So the Gemara said, okay, so Rabbi Kiva says there's nothing, it's not a chiddush here. This is regular, this is a regular category of nice and tam. And we see that nice and tam carries the prohibition. Eating the taste of non-kosher food that lingers in the pot is like eating the non-kosher food itself. Okay, v'rabanan k'der b'asiyam menami yefshel like pagma porta. Even though it's less than a day old, but there's at least a small amount of fouling of taste that occurs, and that's sort of even though most of the taste is actually positive, because there's a small amount of taste fouling. Therefore, the fact that the Torah treats it as prohibition you can't learn from other categories. Okay. Amar le Rav Acha Breder of Evil Rav Ashi. So Rav Acha the son of Rav Ida asked Rav Ashi with Rabbana Nishma Rabbi Kiva. From the rabbi's opinion, let's explore the opinion of Rabbi Kiva. Lav Amar Rabbanan Hai Mishras Litin Tam Keker. The rabbis say from Mishras, from Nazir, Tam Keker, and we learn out to the rest of Torah, right? We learn out of Klayim, we learn out to Arla, like we said before, that just like Nazir has the prohibition of Tam Keker, the taste of wine is the key prohibition of Nazir. And if the Nazir consumes that taste, even without consuming the substance itself, he violates the prohibition. So similarly, to all other prohibitions of eating, if that's the case, let's make the same argument in Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva Nami, let's say that the concept of heter mitzaref l'isser, according to Rabbi Kiva, which is true by Nazir, is true in the rest of all prohibitions relating to foods. You have a question together on the question? Okay. Okay. So the answer is Amalei Mishin to have a Nazir v'chatas base suva bam ke'echad v'koshnek suva bam ke'echad ein melamde. As follows, because this concept of heter mitzaref l'isser shows up in two different places, and the idea that we have, one of the hermeneutic principles is that when a new idea appears twice, we say that it becomes exclusive. In other words, if you have an idea appear once, so you say anything that's similar to that idea, we can compare it. We can compare it to, right? Just like we said before in the rabbi's opinion, we said that Nazir, Tam Keker of Nazir, we can compare the rest of the Torah to Nazir. Nazir is the least severe of all the prohibitions and still has the severity of Tam Keker. Everything else, which is more severe, obviously also has Tam Keker. We're making a comparison. But in the case of, if you say that Nazir teaches heter mitzaref l'isser, we find heter mitzaref l'isser in two scenarios, and therefore we say it becomes exclusive. Only those two situations have heter mitzaref l'isser and nothing else. What's the other instance of heter mitzaref l'isser? The other instance is chatos. Once a chatos passes its prime, so to speak, right? So you slaughter a chatos, you have a day and a night to eat it. And after a day and a night, it becomes tamei, becomes impure. You cannot consume it. Okay, so Nazir and Chat, and we find in that halacha that heter is mitzaref l'isser. Let's see. Nazir hadamarin. So Nazir heter mitzaref l'isser. We saw that's from Mishras, for the extra word of Mishras. Chatas, a Nazir dipping his bread. Chatas mahi. What's the source of chatas? The Tanya we learn as follows: Kol sheyiga b'vsara yikdash. Anything that touches its flesh is sanctified. Yachal afilu shaloi bala. I would think even a situation where, where it's not swallowed, even if it touches, the meat. If you have, okay, as follows. In other words, chatas becomes tamei. Chatas will make a person tamei even if he swallows it. And let's say chatos gets confused with with a shlomim. So and they touch each other. So you have to treat it as if everything is chatos, as if it's the more severe category. And the Gemara presumes that this is all true, even if it's less than a kazayas. That must be because heter mitzaref l'isser. Meaning, if a guy consumes less than a kazayas of chatos, together with less than a kazayas of shlomim, and that chatos is expired, he violates the prohibition of chatos, even though he did not consume a kazayas. And the reason for this must be because heter mitzaref l'isser. Now that we know that chatos and nazir have the concepts of heter mitzaref l'isser, we say it's an exclusive category, and we cannot compare any other prohibition to the concept of heter mitzaref l'isser. Okay.
The term which we just used, yes, you can say it, translate it again.
Which one? Heter mitzaref
Yeah,
l'isser.
yeah.
Heter mitzaref l'isser means the half a measurement of a prohibited substance could combine with half a measurement of permitted substance, and that itself violates the prohibition. Typically, to violate prohibition, you need to eat a full measurement of prohibited substance. Heter mitzaref l'isser says if you eat a full measurement, but only half was prohibited substance, you still incur a violation. Okay. So Gemara says, "V'Rabbanan tzrichi." According to the rabbis, they needed to say both nazir and chatas. The ikatz rachmana gabe chatas havamina. 1 second. In other words, according to the rabbis, why don't they say that the concept here is tam keker? And in other words, why don't we say that tam keker is an exclusive category that pertains to both nazir and chatas? According to Rabbi Kiva, we're saying heter mitzaref l'isser is exclusive. Well, according to the Rabbanan, why don't we say tam keker is exclusive and nothing else should be tam keker? So the Gemara says because it needs to say both. The Torah would have just said tam keker with regard to a korban chatos. I would say that chatos is kachim, so therefore it's more severe. That's why tam keker is true by chatos. And I can't learn nazir from chatas because the Rahman Gabe Nazir have a minimum nazir le'alfina mishum the chomer isurei. If it would have just said tam keker by nazir, I can't learn out anything else. The afilu chartz and osrei, because the Torah prohibits even peels from the prohibited substance, which is really wine. Therefore, I can't learn tam keker from nazir. 1 second. Okay. Therefore, I can't learn time keker from Nazir, except for the fact that Nazir, you combine Nazir with Chatas, and I can learn out of both of them together. Because they're both exclusive. In other words, sorry. If the Torah would not have said, in other words, when do we say this concept that if the Torah repeats something twice, it becomes exclusive? The idea is as follows. The Torah could have just written it once, and everything else would have been compared to that original source. Why does the Torah write it twice? Needlessly, to make it exclusive. But if it's not needlessly, it's necessary because I couldn't cross compare them. So then I can learn from both of them. It's not an exclusive category. In other words, because it wouldn't need to say Nazir and Chatas because you can't compare them to each other. So Gemara says, Rabbi Kiva says, no, it is needless. Why? Why is it necessary to write it twice? Because of Rahman Chatas, like Governor Nazir Minah. That it's true that if the Torah would have just a time heter and staraf iser, in other words, half a kazayas of prohibition amongst the full kazayas of food violates the iser, would have just said that with regard to chatas, like Governor Nazir Minah. I would not be able to learn Nazir from chatas to chulin mikachim like amrinan, because it can't learn chulin from kachim. And let the Rahmana ben Nazir, let the Torah just write it by Nazir, v'teisi chatas minayin. And I would learn Chatas from Nazir, because I can learn everything from Nazir. So why can't I learn Chatas too? Why does the Torah need to repeat itself by Chatas to make it exclusive? Okay, 1 second. Okay, the rabbis teach Chatas lahatim tzaref le'eser. Chatas is true; it's for hatim tzaref le'eser. And you can't compare Nazir is not able to be learned from Chatas. And Mishras teaches us Tam Keker, and that's how we know Tam Keker by the rest of the prohibitions. Rabbi Kiva says, Rabbi Kiva says that both Nazir and Chatos teach me Heter and Staraf Lister. And the fact that Nazir and Chatos make an exclusive category of Heter and Staraf Lister, Tam Keker, according to Rabbi Kiva, is learned out of a different set of rules. It's learned out of the pots that they conquered in Midian. Okay, stop there.
Wow.
Okay,